You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, everybody? I'm BJ Kissel. This is KCSN Update, our daily Chief show and podcast here at KC Sports Network. Appreciate you for hanging out and spending part of your day with us. The Prince of YouTube breakdowns, Brett Kollmann, will join me in just a few minutes to help break down his key matchups and what to watch for schematically on Saturday as the Chiefs host the Jaguars in the divisional round of the AFC playoffs, a rematch from the Week 10 game. And so we'll get Brett's thoughts on what's changed for the Jaguars and what Chiefs fans need to be worried about in watching and getting ready for this game on Saturday. But before we bring on Brett, here's a quick word from our partner, DraftKings. The NFL playoff action continues. We're one step closer to Super Bowl 57. And for the divisional round, check out DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can take a shot at an even bigger payout with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Boost your NFL winnings with each leg you add up to 100%. Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites on Saturday with an over-under that's gone from 51.5 up to 53. Bills, last I checked, 4.5-point favorites. Cowboys at 2.5. Eagles at 7. For me, I always like taking the Chiefs and the over, pretty much my go-to. And when you looked at the last time these two teams faced, Chiefs racked up nearly 500 yards of offense, turned the ball over 3 times, and gave up an onside kick. And it didn't matter. We'll see what happens with McCole Hardman, talked about yesterday, expecting him to play, did not practice. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But make sure you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use code KCSN as new customers can bet $5 on the NFL Divisional Round and get $200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right, now let's welcome on the Prince of YouTube NFL breakdowns, the king of content, Mr. Brett Kollmann. Brett, how goes it today?
It's going good. I'm sure I have a lot less anxiety than you do leading into yet another divisional round game for Chiefs Kingdom. First of all, congratulations. Second of all,
thank you.
Are you nervous?
Not really. Probably a problem. You know, I don't get real nervous going into these games, and I'm excited to get your take. And I've shared them the last couple of days on this show with our other hosts. But obviously they have a Chiefs slant to what they look at, and you cover the entire NFL. I know you watch the Jags. I know you were watching the Jags Chargers game. Excited to get your thoughts on that, but not as stressed about the Chiefs game as I am about, covering the Chiefs with the network and everything that we have going on. KU and K-State going at it last night, and K-State coming out on top. Getting all that covered, and then we're both headed out to the East-West Shrine Bowl next week to start covering the NFL draft. As for us, we're covering both, trying to keep mentally look ahead at some of the players that are going to be available in the draft and the access and the sit-down interviews we'll get with them while we're out there, while also covering the Chiefs. And we've got a crew of, I think, 8 people coming with us out to Las Vegas for a week to cover the East-West Shrine Bowl. So, yeah, just rolling with a crew to Vegas this year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I know we met up with you guys out there last year. It's a great event.
Oh, it's super. I mean, it's Vegas. How can you have a bad time? It's Vegas, yeah. and you're watching football, and you're sitting on the field at Allegiant. Like it's awesome. It's one of my favorite things to do every single year.
You get to stand wherever you want. Like there's no restrictions. Like you could basically go in a huddle if you want. No one's really going to look at you sideways. So fun. If you like the NFL draft, if you find yourself wanting to, check out players, and that's just something that interests you, I'd invite you to go out to the East-West Shrine Bowl and watch practices and get out there. It's a whole lot of fun. But Brett, speaking of a whole lot of fun, I think we've got a good slate of games in the divisional round this weekend. Before we get into the Chiefs Jags, are any other games that you're really interested in, keeping an eye on and how these things play out?
I mean, obviously Bills Bengals, mainly because it's going to determine the other half of the AFC Championship game, but also because both of those teams have developed some pretty intriguing weaknesses based on injuries they've recently taken. The Bills secondary is less banged up now than it was a couple weeks ago, but it's still a weakness in my opinion. The secondary is still very vulnerable, and they're going up against arguably, if not inarguably, the best wide receiver duo in the entire league. So it's going to be on them to basically survive. Like they're not going to cover them. They have to just survive. And meanwhile, the Bengals offensive line, super banged up. Jonah Williams dislocated his kneecap. Chiefs fans know how painful that is. Alex Kappa's week to week. Lyle Collins is already out. So, will Joe Burrow be able to survive long enough to actually get the ball? I think it's definitely a fascinating matchup. And I wish both those teams were at full strength so that we could see, them throw haymakers at each other from the best possible positions, but they're not. And I'm not quite sure which one is in worse shape right now. So that game definitely intrigues me.
Cool. Yeah, I think the Bills Bengals is going to be the one that everybody is looking forward to. I was a little surprised that it was the afternoon game for this one, but I'm also pretty intrigued with the Dallas San Francisco, just the Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, and the way that the 49ers defense is playing. That one, if Dallas loses that game, I'm not a Dallas fan, not into that, but like it'll be really interesting if Brock Purdy goes out and outplays Dak Prescott.
I wouldn't be surprised, not necessarily that Purdy would play Prescott, but I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers kind of run them off the field, because that is a machine of a team. Like, even
Defense
when they
is
look
stupid.
like they're having an okay day, they're putting up 40 points. This is one of the highest levels that I've ever seen the Kyle Shanahan system operated at. And Purdy's running it better than Jimmy G ever did, and Jimmy G took him to a Super Bowl. So this is it's fascinating to me, like how good Purdy is with this system. And I think we're already at the point where, even when Trey Lance is coming back next year, it's an open competition for the starting job. It really is, because the offense, it didn't look like this when Trey was running it. I know we have a small sample size, but like it just didn't. It was not this efficient. So yeah, I think Dallas is a very talented team. They obviously have a shot, especially if Dak is playing like he was last week, like he was playing out of his mind. But I mean, the 49ers they're a doomsday device at this point.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the Chiefs Jags. That's what this audience wants to hear about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. Obviously, we did this show leading into the first matchup between these two teams, and at that time, the Jags were really struggling. I believe they had lost 5 of 6 going into that game. I think they were 3-7 at that point. And since losing to the Chiefs 27-17 in that game, they won 7 of the last 8 games, and they really seem to have figured some things out. Curious. Let's start with the Jags offense. Let's talk with Trevor Lawrence, because I've shared my thoughts on him over the last couple of days on this show with Matt Miller, with Nate Taylor. And I want to get your thoughts on what Chiefs fans should be worried about and what you expect to happen, I guess, schematically, the types of routes, the types of plays, the way that they may try and attack this Chiefs defense based on what we've seen.
And it's interesting, and I don't want to be doom and gloom here, because I fully understand the Chiefs are favored in this game, and there's a reason they're favored in this game. But if we go back to the first matchup, that Week 10 game, it kind of took place right at the beginning of the ascendancy of Trevor Lawrence and the ascendancy of this team, right? 27-17, seems like the game was fairly well in hand. Keep in mind, Jags missed 2 field goals in that game, and they had a touchdown called back. It was closer than you think. And I think that schematically, looking at how Doug Peterson attacked the Spagnuolo defense in that game, and also a little bit of how he attacked the Chargers defense, they had some beaters dialed up. And I was putting together some numbers for this. The Chargers in the first half, before they chargered all over the place, they were playing a lot of cover 3, basically into every single look, 2x2, 3x1. They were playing cover 3, and they were doing their best to kind of constrain everything to the middle of the field. We're going to play outside leverage with the DBs. We're going to collision them if they're going outside. We're going to try to funnel everything inside and make Trevor Lawrence throw into a forest of hands. And it was.
And you look at the number, and if you look at the numbers, that will tell you what you want to do. He is much better throwing outside the numbers, outside the hashes, than he is down the middle of the field.
100%. And like he makes these like far hash outs look easy. Like he throws it like Pat does, where you're like, oh my God, that's insane. But there were some plays against cover 3, not an interception, but there was one where he threw a hospital ball where the safety came down and just absolutely detonated his receiver. And like that was the game plan, is force him into making those types of throws. And so then we got into the second quarter, like mid to late second quarter, and then through the rest of the game, where Peterson was like, screw it. We're going to, no more bunches, a lot less 2x2. We're going to spread them out and go like 3x1, like true spread stuff. because we want to make it as risky as possible for them to play cover 3. And we want them to get more into all of the quarters and quarter half stuff. And once they did that, they completely opened it up. They were breaking all the coverage rules of the Chargers defense. They had the play calls that, put defenders in conflict and basically gave them no-win situations. The long Zay Jones touchdown was very similar to the same play that I think the Rams ran against the Bears in the first week of the last season, which was another kind of Vic Fangio defense. They played cover 8. It was quarter, half field to the safety, or half field safety to the passing strength. They overloaded him with multiple vertical routes, and there was nobody to carry it. Literally the same play against the same coverage, nobody to carry it. The nickel let the guy go. The safety was already, outside, and there was nobody to cover Zay Jones. And I know that's a whole lot of jargon at once, but what I'm trying to say is they went 3-by-1. They forced them into coverages that they weren't playing as much in the first half, and then broke their own rules in order to get those touchdowns. And so I was like, okay, well, how does this apply to the Chiefs defense? Yeah. Chiefs run less cover 3 than everyone else in the league, like by far. Against 2-by-2 looks, I think it was like 10%. The average is about 33. So they just don't run it. They run cover 2, they run quarters, and they run man. Like those are the 3 main coverages they run. If they're going to run any middle field closed structure, it's going to be man coverage. Other than that, it's like a lot of cover 2 and quarters, a little bit of quarter, half, but mostly quarters. And so I'm like, okay, well, Doug Peterson showed in the last game and in the games leading up to it that if you're giving him 2 high safety structures, he's going to out scheme you. Like really, really well. He's going to out scheme you. And that's when I went back and looked at week 10. I was like, okay, well, let me look at every single coverage snap in cover 2 and every single coverage snap in quarters. I'm telling you, BJ, it was dialed up. Like it was there. Like Christian Kirk had a monster day and he should have had another 100 yards on top of that. There was one big gainer against Tampa 2 where the ball got knocked down at the line of scrimmage. There was 2 more that were taken away by sacks. Like if the defensive front didn't play out of their minds in that game, Chiefs would have lost. Straight up, they would have lost. And I all this to say, schematically, I am concerned here because the Chiefs do not play the same style of defense that the Chargers played to constrain this defense. And the type of defense the Chiefs play is the exact type of defense that Doug Peterson is really good at exploiting. So, like, we need Chris Jones to play out of his mind. We need Karlaftis. We need all these edges. Like, they need to have the game of their life because schematically speaking on the back end, this favors Jacksonville, as weird as that is to say.
So if you were Spagnuolo with the schemes that they run, how would you set it up to not lead yourself into a situation? Because all the things that we're talking about, I'm assuming Steve Spagnuolo knows this. They know Doug Peterson. They can look at the film from last week. What would you do differently?
I would,
besides tell Chris Jones to have the game of his life.
I would break tendencies and run cover 3 seam. I really would. Which means, against 3-by-1, depending on who's at the number 3 spot on the inside, I would have different cover 3 checks depending on how they're lined up. If Christian Kirk is the number 3 inside, which they love to put him as the number 3 inside, I would probably keep the strong safety carrying the vertical from number 2, and then have the free safety come down and kind of nail down on the number 3. So I guess we'll just call that quarters. It'll play out. 3 seam against trips can be kind of funky where it looks a lot like quarters. But there's different ways to run cover 3 against that. Like even the Chargers did that a couple snaps. I really wish they stuck with it. I think they kind of got scared out of it a little bit. But you got to run more cover 3 is what I'm trying to say. Like there's different ways to do it against trips, and they got to do it. Because if they don't, I have genuine concern that the deep middle of the field will be picked apart.
All right. This is my next question. Is if you're a Chiefs fan, you're watching and you're sitting here listening and you're talking about those 2 high looks pre-snap, somebody doesn't understand the game at your level. what can they be watching for to understand some of the things that you're talking about as far as those too high looks? You're talking about the seam, the middle of the field is going to get attacked if they do what you're telling them you don't think they should, which is set it up for Doug Peterson to be able to attack cover two. That's easy to see with the too high look. What other things can people look for pre-snap to give an indication of whether or not they're breaking tendencies or playing, cover three and those types of things?
If you're on the broadcast angle and you see that the two safeties are high, but you see one is at like 12 yards and one's at 10 yards, you know something funky's happening and one's going to roll down. Or if they're even, but you see one of them kind of leaning forward a little bit before the snap, you know one of them, even if he's not explicitly coming down into the hook or, hauling ass to get out to the curl, sometimes they'll just kind of sit there at about a 10-yard depth and just wait because they know that that's where the curl zone would have been anyway,
Yeah.
or the hook zone would have been anyway. So they'll wait for the defense to form and mold around them. So just kind of like watch their stance, watch how deep they are, because I do think that Spags is a smart coach. He will break tendencies if he needs to. I think they're going to call it more in this game because that's what worked last week. And I think that's what you should look at. Just look at the safeties and how they're standing and how deep they're standing.
All right, more from Brett Kollmann right after this. I want to ask him about Trevor Lawrence's numbers against pressure because, shocker, they're not very good, and I want Brett's reasoning why. All right, welcome back to KCSN Update. I'm BJ Kissel, joined by YouTube's king of content, Brett Kollmann, giving us all the goods on the schematic things to watch for in this game. Just got done talking about Steve Spagnuolo's defense, Doug Peterson's offense, and what he believes the Chiefs should not do to set themselves up for what Doug Peterson has shown to be very, very good at. One of the things that regarding the Jags that they've shown to not be very good at, two things with Trevor Lawrence, and looking at some of the advanced numbers that stood out to me, Brett, you can kind of give me the film study breakdown of what these numbers mean. But Trevor Lawrence, third fastest time to attempt in the NFL in the regular season. The only guys who got the ball out faster were Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, looking at 2.39 seconds. He loves to get the ball out of his hands. And then among qualified quarterbacks, which I put as playing at least 20% of the snaps this year, Trevor Lawrence ranked 34th out of 39 quarterbacks under pressure. Is this a lack of ability to get outside the pocket and make plays? Is he just hanging in the pocket, waiting for things to develop, or does he have trouble coming off his first read? Because his passer rating, or his PFF grade, I should say, was like 29 against pressure. Like, it was significantly poor, and everybody's a little bit worse under pressure. We know that. But relative to everybody else in the league, he really struggles based on those numbers when there's guys around him or you take him off his first read. Is that a fair assessment based on those numbers? And how can you rattle him in this way?
Off the top of my head, I would have to imagine the grade as well as the passer rating is heavily affected by interceptions. And I could remember like at least 4, maybe 5 picks where, and especially they were in the red zone, so it was even worse, where he was kind of trying to be too anticipatory and, look guys off and then just, kind of feel somebody being open. And then he would come back and rip it and be like, oh, crap, there was a hang defender there. Like the same thing happened against the Chargers. He threw the second pick to Asante Samuel, right? It was on a mesh call against cover 2. And he's looking at like 2 hook defenders. And he's like, I'm going to hold them on the OTB route over the middle. And I know that Ingram is going to be coming wide open underneath them. We're just kind of create space. And so he's looking, doesn't even look at Ingram, and then turns and rips it. And he's like, oh my God, Asante Samuel's sitting inside, like way further inside than he should be on paper. But he didn't look. He just anticipated and tried to feel it and was wrong. And I kind of feel like under pressure, when his clock speeds up, he doesn't look. He doesn't glance. He just is just like, I think based on where I see the safeties are that this is going to be open. And he just full confidence just sends it. And he gets in trouble that way. So I would like for him to learn to glance more. and Pat does a wonderful job at that. Like his eyes process things faster than anybody else, where he can just kind of glance at somebody 35 yards away and know that he can hit it. Like he does do the no look stuff every now and then, but not as much as you think. Like he does have good field vision. I want Lawrence to develop that.
The other thing about Trevor Lawrence that stood out and looking, and I mentioned it earlier, just it felt like a lot of the plays being made against the Chargers specifically, because I'm not going to pretend to have watched a ton of Trevor Lawrence, but the plays being made were the yards after the catch and those things. But the other thing that stood out to me, and I'm not trying to hate on Trevor Lawrence, I know he's a good young quarterback, but I saw more free rushers in that game than I had seen. Maybe again, it's watching a lot of Patrick Mahomes and they're so dead set on getting the protections right. But the Chargers had at least 2 or 3 free rushers that I remember watching in that game, wondering to myself when I saw it, is that just a miscommunication up front that it was just perfectly timed and the offensive line didn't see it? Or is this a young quarterback who doesn't quite have the protection set as consistently as we see with some other quarterbacks, where you don't see a lot of free rushers in the NFL at this level, especially as you get into the playoffs? These guys are locked in. I could be completely out to lunch here, but I just 2 or 3 times a game to get a completely free rusher with nobody getting a hand on him at all. There's obviously a breakdown somewhere. Have you seen this consistently with Lawrence, or was just this a good job by the Chargers?
It's funny because both the Chargers and the Jags defense were very similar in the sense that they were top 6. If I recall correctly, I was looking at it last week. I think they were top 6 both in like amount of fire zone called on third down.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both ranked really, really high in terms of free rushers generated, guys coming unblocked.
Okay.
The Jags actually led the league in number of unblocked rushers created on fire zone. They do it like 1.5 times a game. And the Chargers are very similar. And so I actually wasn't that surprised to see unblocked rushers.
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, that's what they do. They're pretty good at that. Like, and the Jags are going to do it to the Chiefs too. Like, obviously they're better at calling protections than most people, but like they're going to call fire zone a lot and stress and test those protections. And Pat, statistically speaking, is going to have to deal with it at least once, and we'll see how he does.
All right, let's move on to the other side. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes going up against this Jags defense and what we saw back in Week 10. It's easy for us to look at the box score. Patrick Mahomes, he had 330 yards, 4 touchdowns. They had 155 yards rushing. Seems like offensively, the Chiefs were able to execute whatever they wanted to do based on those numbers. Obviously, the Jags playing better football right now. What can Chiefs fans take away from that Week 10 matchup about what they had success with against that version of the Jags compared to what we're going to see on Saturday with this version of the Jags and the way that they're playing right now?
I mean, I still have full utmost confidence in the offense. I do not think the Jags can cover the Chiefs, and not just Kelsey. I'm talking about any of them. Like there's a couple DBs in the Jags secondary I think are young and solid, but a lot of the Jags secondary is straight up not good. And so I don't think they have an answer for Travis Kelce. Kadarius Toney on option routes, I don't think they have any good options for him in the slot. I really do think that this is going to turn into, maybe not a complete shootout, maybe not like a 35-36, but I don't think either team is going to be held under 24. I think it's going to be somewhere in the high 20s for both teams. It's going to be a very offense-centric game. And truth be told, it might come down to who gets the ball last, which I know is an uncomfortable spot for the Chiefs because they've been burned by that before, but it really might come down to that.
We're recording this on a Wednesday morning. I just wanted to wake up, have my Kool-Aid, and just hear how stress-free this game is going to be on Saturday, Brett, and you're ruining my morning. You're ruining my morning right now. But you've been right before, and you've been right this year, and obviously you're very plugged in with all this stuff. So I don't like hearing it, but let's talk a little bit more, because schematically, what do the Jags like to do, and what's the best way to attack that, so fans that are listening, and even for myself, can know the types of things to look for, the types of routes, the types of the beaters for the different things that they do. I know we talked about quarter, half, I believe last time. When is that the Jags that run a ton of quarter, half, or am I mixing teams up here?
The Vikings do it. The Broncos do it. Basically all the Vic Fangio guys. Chargers do it a little bit less, but the Jags actually run like a lot of middle field close coverages, so it's mostly cover 3 and cover 1, which I think benefits the Chiefs, because now They can get a lot. They have a million ways to beat cover 3, but like I think that we get Travis Kelce working on Sale. We get MVS and Tony working on like spear, like deep crosses, that kind of stuff. Put the free safety in conflict. Use what speed you have. Like I would like to see Kelce on, like a stick nod up the seam, all that kind of stuff that beats these middle field closed coverages. And that's part of the reason why I think the Chiefs offense is going to do really well in this game. But the reason why the Jags play those middle field closed structures is so that they can call so much fire zone, so that there's an extra body down low so that they can send somebody, whether it's the nickel, the will, the Mike, the safety. They want to have as many available resources to get after the quarterback as humanly possible. So they will send 5+ rushers quite frequently at Mahomes. And to be honest, they'll send them at Pacheco too. Like, they're not afraid to call it on early downs. They're really not, because they can kind of stop the run on the way to the quarterback. And if they get a free fitter coming off the edge against the run, they'll still take the TFL. So I'm not super worried about it, because the Chiefs are very good in terms of identifying and handling pressure, but you need to be aware they're going to see it quite frequently. And I don't expect to see a whole lot of cover 2. Don't expect to see a whole lot of quarters. If they play quarters, it's going to be probably in very certain downs and distances, 3rd and long, that kind of stuff. And it's going to be more like we're just putting a tent over the top of the offense, rally and tackle, that kind of stuff. But lots of middle field close, lots of blitzes.
All right, more from Brett Kollmann. Get his predictions right after this quick break. And welcome back to KCSN Update, hanging out with Brett Kollmann from his YouTube channel, Brett Kollmann, but also from Bootleg Football. They put out a lot of good stuff across the entire NFL with his partner, EJ Snyder. Let's get a little prediction, Brett. You just threw wet blanket all over my Chiefs hype and how excited I was getting for Saturday. I'm just giving you a hard time, but I was a little bit more excited about this game than I am right now. I'm a little more nervous than I was before. But let's get your prediction. How do you see this one playing? I know you mentioned earlier probably some sort of shootout, but how do you see this one playing out?
There's 2 answers to this. There's the money line answer, and there's the spread answer. I predict the Chiefs to win, okay? Which I know for a lot of Chiefs fans is all I care about. But if you're betting on this game, 8.5 dogs, Jacksonville, really? 8.5? That's how aggressive we're going with that? Hell no. I think the Jags keep it closer than that. They should have kept it closer last time. Like, again, we're talking about 2 missed field goals and a touchdown callback. Like, even if
the Chiefs had 3 turnovers and they gave up an onside kick, to be fair.
I'm just saying, like, if
4 extra possessions.
Hey, the Chargers had 5 extra possessions and they lost.
That's the Chargers. You can't put them in any kind of box compared to anybody else. That is the Chargers. That's who they are.
From a schematic perspective, I do not feel that the difference between these teams is 8.5 points. You could convince me on like 3 or 4. And so for me, I'm betting the Jags to cover, but I'm also betting the Chiefs to win, which at the end of the day, that punches their ticket to host in the AFC Championship in Arrowhead. So I'm sure Chiefs will take that.
So you're assuming that Cincinnati is going to win that game, because otherwise they are hosting that game at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in Atlanta.
Oh, you're right.
If Chiefs fans want to go, they can expend a measly $1,600 per ticket right now to go to Atlanta to watch them play in the AFC Championship game.
I totally forgot about the neutral site.
People here didn't. Season ticket members.
Not
thrilled.
So
for good reason.
I understand why they did it though.
Yeah.
Like I totally, there was kind of a no-win situation. Bengals fans are even more pissed than Chiefs fans.
And they should be.
They want this to be a neutral site game.
I agree with it. I understand Chiefs fans are upset. You want to go by the letter of the law, like all of those things. But when you just step back and just kind of look like what makes the most sense, like not about like the hard rules, but just Buffalo beat Kansas City. It's like that's the part that if the Chiefs would have beat the Bills, then something like this played out. However, with the win-loss record, I'd feel differently. But because they were a game short, they win that game. They're hosting. And I know a lot of people thought Cincinnati was going to win that game and that wouldn't have mattered, but they didn't get a chance to play that. Even if they did, you have the same record, or if they would have ended up with the same record and they beat us, it's different. I feel bad for season ticket members that buy season tickets for the opportunity to go to these games and watch the confetti fall at an AFC Championship game because of how special that is. But yeah,
let's also be honest. The Chiefs got the best end of the stick in the sense that they just said, okay, here's your bye week. Like you just got given the bye. So you still ended up okay. You got
the two teams that got the more raw end of it are the two teams that the Chiefs lost to this season. They lost to both of those teams. And so I understand, again, the season ticket member frustrations about wanting to go to that game, but from a competitive advantage and just from an NFL like global perspective, the Chiefs got the better end of how this all played out for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things where like it sucks, but like a guy almost died on the field. So circumstances were different, it's just, it is what it is. And it was horrible all around. And we can just be happy he made it. And then it wasn't even worse. And, see you in the Super Bowl, folks. Like that's what we're hoping for here.
Yeah. All right. Let's get your thoughts real quick on the rest of the games for the playoffs to kind of set up Brett Kollmann's predictions on what the championship weekend is going to look like. Is we'll be hanging out in Vegas. You come hang out with us for the AFC Championship. I don't know what you guys are doing for that, but you come hang out with us in Las Vegas since we'll be out there watching the Chiefs hopefully play if they take care of business against the Jags. But how do you see the rest of these games? Let's start with the rest of the other AFC game. How do you see Bills and Bengals playing out?
I see the Bills winning barely. Okay. And then I see the Chiefs winning, not barely, but closer than last time. And so, I unfortunately for the season ticket holders, I see Bills Chiefs in the AFC Championship game down in Atlanta with perfect temperature and no snow and no wind and two crazy ass arms throwing the football around. So, God, I wish it was in Vegas. That would have been.
I thought there was a chance. I don't know if it was ever even entertained, but I was like, you know what? They're set up. They've got staff out there because the Shrine Bowl is going on. They could put a game in there easily. They've got all the hotels. The Pro Bowl is getting ready to be out there. There's some synergies there. Thought it made sense. And then somebody told me that Buffalo wasn't traveling west of Kansas City. Like they weren't going to travel that much further. They were going to stay on the East Coast somewhere.
But they're traveling. I mean, they're north of Kansas City and they're traveling further south to it. Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
They'd want to make it easier for their fans to get there, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
But it doesn't really matter for either fan base if tickets are $1,600, which may have just been the one place I looked, but they were like 5 times as expensive as any other playoff ticket.
I would think the NFL would supplement the cost to help drive it down. Like, I don't know.
Really? Really?
If I was running the league, like it's $1,600 is ridiculous. I don't even think it even costs that much in Arrowhead.
No.
Like not even close. So I don't know. That seems like are they jacking up the prices to reward the Falcons for stepping in and hosting it?
Or they just know that it's going to be not a full stadium. And so they're trying to offset the number of tickets they're not going to sell by just gouging the people that can't afford to go and making them pay that premium because they'll make up that money.
It would make it a full stadium? Not having expensive tickets.
Yeah.
If you lowered the price, more people would go. Oh God. Whatever. I'm not an NBA, so I can't tell the NFL what to do.
I'm sure they're maximizing their revenue and how many fans have the ability to go to that game, and season ticket members is probably not atop their list based on at least the prices that we've seen. So let's get over to the NFC side. Giants, Eagles, another fun one. If you like just old school NFC East rivalry action football, like this is a fun one. I've seen some of the signs coming out of Philly already. That would definitely be one of those atmospheres that, as somebody that doesn't really care who wins that game, that would just be a fun game to be at in that environment with Philly fans. But how do you see that one playing out, Brett?
I still see the Eagles winning that game. I think the Giants are a legitimately good team, and their run game is phenomenal. Like that's what really I love the most, how they designed their run game. And the passing game is okay, but Daniel Jones played really well, super efficient, made no mistakes, set guys up for great yards after catch opportunity. But I do think that there is still a lack of quick strike ability other than Saquon breaking a run. They still did not have any pass attempts under 20 yards or over 20 yards against the Vikings defense, who are really, really bad. So I think that it's more of a we will grind you into dust type team rather than somebody who, when they go down, they can take shots and come back, like basically every AFC team that's left in the field. So I do think that they have their limitations matchup wise, but they are not an easy team to beat. They really aren't. They play tough defense and they run the ball well. And in these colder months, that goes a long way.
All right, let's move on to the other game. I already know that you're taking the Niners, but I'm curious if there's a game that you would hammer the line more than the Niners being favored by 4 points.
The Niners are only favored by 4?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
At home.
That seems low. Like, I don't think they're going to blow them out by 10 points, but 4 seems slightly low. I would lean more on like 6 or 7, like that. That feels more comfortable to me. So yeah, I would take Niners to cover that for sure.
Of the 4 games, that's the line that it's like, okay, I would take the Niners for sure there with their defense, the way that they're playing. And
I would take Niners at 4, parlay that with Jags at 8.5 and sleep like a baby. I really would.
I can't wait to doing this video next week in person with you from Vegas after the Chiefs win by like 25 points. It's just going to be me dunking on Brett the entire time. I'm just throwing that out there right now. All right. Final thoughts before we let everybody go. Favorite storyline going into this weekend before we say goodbye.
Ascendancy of young quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, making his first, not deep playoff run yet, but first playoff run, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. I think the dichotomy between the number 1 overall, the chosen one, the guy who was it since high school versus, Brock Purdy, who turned down Nick Saban because Nick Saban had no idea who he was. He didn't even know that he was offered, and he was a 4-star and said, I'm going to go to Iowa State where I'm appreciated. And he's this little dude. He's like 5'11", 100 pounds soaking wet, last pick in the draft. I think from a storyline perspective, if the Chiefs are not in the Super Bowl, I want the Jags there because number 1 versus Mr. Irrelevant is just too good to pass up.
That would be pretty good. Good stuff. All right. We've got plenty more content getting you ready for Chiefs and Jags on Saturday here at KC Sports Network. Special thanks to Brett Kollmann for hanging out with us. We'll be in person with Brett and several others out at the East West Shrine Bowl next week, but we'll continue to have you covered. Hopefully as the Chiefs are getting ready for an AFC championship game, either against the Bengals at Arrowhead or against the Bills down at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Appreciate everybody for hanging out, spending part of your day with us. We'll see you next time.